Hello, everyone, and welcome to Refresh. This is our time to connect, be inspired, learn something, and ultimately feel just a bit better for this time we've spent together. This is what Generation W, after all, is all about. So I have to tell you, in prepping for today's conversation, as you may have noticed, I do like to reflect on where we've been and the moving and insightful thoughts from our last conversation that has moved us through the week. And as I thought about Jamie Oken and Dr. Wynn, if you haven't seen their talk on mental health, honestly, go to YouTube, check it out. I realized it felt like eons ago. And I wondered why. It's like, does every week feel like an eon with what we're all trying to manage in our lives, with the additional overlays of the ongoing pandemic pressures, which are getting increasingly closer to home here, and our desires to understand and take action against racial injustice? You know, it is the everyday and the extraordinary in our collective everydays that actually can be and is exhausting. And yet, the opportunities are exciting. As for me, I just want to let you know, I have actually created goals. I got a goal book, and I write them down, which is not what I usually do. It includes reading, watching, and listening. And reading, just in case you might be interested, currently reading What is Owed, published today by Nicole Hannah-Jones, the Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter who covers racial injustice for the Times. And she's also the creator of the 1619 Project, which, by the way, I also started listening to that podcast. Thank you, Melinda. It's extraordinary. This is the time to also have conversations. Dialogue is what is encouraged, not debate, as Dr. Wynn did say last week, because he reminded us that the more we share, the more we evolve. And that is so why we are so happy to welcome a truly extraordinary woman today. She is an extraordinary person, caring, generous, thoughtful, lives in the service of others, has overcome so many personal barriers, which she has openly spoken about. Not for her own betterment, although always when we speak about some of the things that trouble us, it does help us grow through them, but for others who can see how others have handled things and can be better. And that's what she's done, including, sexual abuse, homelessness. I am telling you, she is so inspiring. She's a star athlete, has become a police officer, and she's going to tell us why she chose to become a police officer, and has 20 years of service at the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, where she led PAL, the Police Athletic League, and community engagement. I don't think there's many people who do not know Lakesha Burton. She is now the assistant chief and zone commander, and she wanted me to say in patrol. I guess that's the official language, but she comes to us today as Lakesha Burton, humanitarian. And anything she expresses today is of her own personal views and not an official statement of her department in any way. So I just wanted to remind us all of that. I am so grateful to you, Lakesha, for joining us today. And I really think the first question for all of us who know you and also know the work you do and the world we're living in is, how are you?
First of all, thank you for allowing me to join you on Refresh. I wanted to make sure I was in the comfort of my home, chilling out and enjoying this conversation today. So how am I feeling? That's a great question. So I've been on an emotional roller coaster, like many of us. And I think that we all have been impacted, but in different ways. A lot of people don't know that when we first had the first protests downtown, I was down there on that day. And honestly, at the very beginning, I was very happy and proud of the peaceful protests, people exercising their voices and their constitutional rights. And we as JSO officers, we were very proud to protect the rights of citizens to peacefully protest. So how am I doing? From my perspective, it has been very frustrating and painful. And so I'm happy to get in this discussion to kind of share why I feel that way. But it's been tough for all of us.
Yeah,
the COVID-19.
And COVID-19. Well, tell us about it. Tell us more. Tell us, tell us where your frustrations come from.
Yeah. So my personal point of view is that I understand a lot of the pain and frustration. I have had many experiences over my lifetime dealing with racism, injustices, and inequalities. And the fact that I've been in my chocolate skin for 45 years, having that instilled in me at an early age by my grandparents that, you know, Blacks are treated differently, and sometimes you're going to have to work 10 times harder than the average person. That, along with my experiences of raising 3 Black sons in this community, I've been asked, do I worry? Do I have that talk with my sons? And some people are shocked when I say absolutely yes. I was having those conversations before I even became a police officer. So the idea of my kids being treated differently because of the color of their skin or the perception of Black boys, coupled with my life experiences, has always scared me, whether they were walking inside of a store, whether they were driving, at school, in their neighborhood. So I worried, and I had those conversations to prepare them not to, I had those conversations to prepare them so they would know how to respond, so they could actually survive different encounters. And I can tell you, when I saw Ahmaud Arbery, I saw my sons. And when I saw George Floyd, I saw my son. So I just believe that majority of humanity wants justice, equality. We want bad cops held accountable. And I don't want to be discriminated against like anybody else. But as far as police officers, I believe in my heart that majority of police officers are good, and that this profession is a calling, and that small percent of bad cops is really what scares me. That small percentage is why I worry and have had those conversations with my son. So what I would want citizens to understand is that we hate that small percentage of bad cops more than you can ever imagine, because it makes our jobs very hard and it hurts. Look at the climate that we're in now towards police officers. And I'm sorry, because it's been very, very difficult to walk. And you know that I love children. So, you know, we're in the community now, and you have small kids that are just terrified. And people have been, quite frankly, hateful towards us, rude. And it's not the vast majority, because majority of citizens in this community have been very supportive. But for a week after those riots began, I like I was in the middle. Then the realization sunk in that for the first time, that I was Black and blue. And for several days, people had a lot of questions. People were doubting. People were fearful, which I understood. So they were calling, asking, different questions, and as if I had to choose a side. So I finally got to the point where I said, I don't have to choose. I am blue and Black, and I'm proud of it. So again, it's just been a trying time for all of us, and I really believe that some good is going to come out of this. Look, you see, you got me all emotional, Donna, already. We just started.
And you've got me all emotional already, and we just started. And there's so many different directions we can go, but you touched on something so important. And we talked about this the other day. As a mom of young Black men and a police officer, you had to have the talk. So the question is, what have you seen that compelled you to have that talk?
Well, it started when I was young, when I would be with my grandparents in Miami. My grandfather owned a business, so he's a businessman. And I just saw how they interacted with the white community versus the Black community. And they would always tell me, walk with your head up, be assertive. We're walking in the store, don't touch anything. So they kind of, got me prepared for when I grew up and would be subjected to racism. So they did it out of love. But so just growing up watching that and then having my sons and, being around my uncles and brothers, how people would treat them, walking in stores and people not giving you customer service, or they're following you, suspecting you will steal, So it's been so many different situations where, inadvertently that people have been discriminatory. Even my oldest son is 30, my youngest is 10. So even in the school system, how many parents have had to go to the district because the teacher called your son a colored boy, So it's been, just thinking about this stuff is very hurtful. So when I see people on the front line angry and hurt and exercising their rights, it was very painful to see because I could relate to them, So it's so many different situations, and all of it is not just with police and, Black people. It's just racism, period. I just had a situation last week. I was with my white officer, female officer, and some guy says, I have a question for the colored officer. And I could just see my officer, her face was red. So, but I'm at a point in my life right now, I try to see obstacles as opportunities. So I didn't say anything. I was very professional with him. But when I left, I had a conversation with her and I asked her, I said, how did that make you feel? Because I could visibly see that she was shaking. And she told me, she said, Chief, I was just so hurt. I was angry. She said, I felt sorry for you. And I said, just imagine 45 years being in my skin, being subjected to that hatred, that ignorance. And, at that moment, she was like, wow, I never thought about it. So I think that as we continue to move through this, instead of getting angry and reacting in a hateful way towards hateful people, that we use it as an opportunity to, explain. A lot of times we don't have these conversations because they've been very uncomfortable, but I think it's time now to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because if we do that, I think that will be the basis for healing. And I know that all too well because of all the trauma that I've been through in my life. And it's because of having those real authentic conversations and being, vulnerable and authentic, that you reach people's hearts and you listen and they listen to you, and then you start to grow from that. So I was able to do that just the other day. But honestly, what the man said to me, she was shocked, but it wasn't shocking to me because racism has been a part of the fabric of the Black community. And what I share with my officers, I am the blue, but I am a part of the Black community. So as a result of this, I've been having conversations that I've never had with my coworkers, and it's been very fruitful. Don, I need to get tissue really quick right here.
I was thinking that. Go ahead. And then when you come back, show us your beautiful shirt, okay? And while you're doing that, I'm going to say hello to a bunch of people. And by the way, the influx of love for you is amazing. Everybody wants to know, from Meg Rose and Tina Wilson. Oh, by the way, Greg Burton. Hey, Greg, you snuck away. We were going to grab you. Tom Karen, Jill Hawkett, Coretta Hill, Tony Richardson, everybody wants you to know how much they appreciate and love you. And I have to say, Brigitte, I can never say her last name, but this is a woman who was my mentee from Ghana. And she is on the phone. She ran for national office in Ghana. And it's so nice to see that she's here after all this time. So, and many, many more. So people want to know that you are loved. And I'm sure there'll be more of that comes through.
Thank you.
But again, let's just go back a little bit, because you touch on something really important. We know that, listen, people aren't born to be racist. They're not born to be mean. right? There's that great song from that show. We are taught all of these things. And then we get caught up in systems, right? And where we behave in certain ways. And sometimes those systems, it's invisible to us, but not all of us, right? What you're saying is there's systemic racism. So we talk about police officers, most 70% of people, whatever, think they're good. And yet in a system that protects the good and the bad, right? We know there's racism in so many different institutions. Mm-hmm. We see it. No matter what industry we're in, we see it. We have the chance now to speak out about it. The police are at the forefront because the badness in that systemic racism often means violence and death. Not often, that's an unfair statement perhaps, but it's violence and death, which is a terrible end result.
Right.
So when we think about reform, and you've been on the inside for 20 years, what do you think?
So I just wrote down something you said, that so many institutions are affected by racism, which systemic racism.
So it's baked in, right? It's built in.
Yes. And I totally agree. What's frustrating for me is that, you have, those bad cops, but you have bad doctors, bad teachers, bad this, and you don't stop going to the doctor. You don't stop going to school because of a bad teacher. So we should not stop supporting law enforcement, right? So what I would say about systemic change is that I think that the first thing that needs to be acknowledged, there needs to be an acknowledgement that reform is needed. And that needs to take place across the country. Every department is different, right? So, but what reform is basically improvements or amendments to what is wrong, corrupt, or unsatisfactory. And I can personally speak for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, where I've been for 21 years. JSO is one of the best agencies abroad. And can we improve? Yes. As a matter of fact, that is really one of our core values of always improving. Many people don't know that we regularly go through an accreditation process where this outside independent entity comes in and does this thorough review inspection. I'm telling you, they are all in your business, right? And they're looking through, they're reviewing, inspecting, determine, in fact, if we are following our policies, our procedures, our training, our tactics, et cetera, and that we are following best practices across the country. And I can tell you, it is stressful. It has been stressful all these years, especially being a supervisor going through this process. It's very tedious. And I'm proud to say that for many, many years, we've earned the Triple Crown accreditation, which is the highest level. And it's definitely something to be proud of. So I'd like to just speak specifically to the agency that I've dedicated my life to, because we do so much good. And what I would say to people in our community is, to get involved, be informed, stay encouraged. Like you said, I was the assistant chief over the community engagement unit for 2 years, and getting people involved is not easy. You have the same people coming to the table. And if you would just go through our website, the jacksheriff.org, and look through that website of all the many programs that we offer, what's happening, Donna, is like what's happening with big churches. These mega churches, they're getting so big. So now they are finding ways on how to connect with members of their congregation so they can maintain the intimacy and continue to build those relationships. So they're creating small groups, right? So essentially that's what we do at the sheriff's office. We have 1 million people in this, in our city, right? And we have only 1,800 officers. So to think that every person in our city is going to have this positive or know an officer one-on-one, it's just not going to happen. So we need our community to help us with that. you know, and I often hear people say, well, you know, are the police policing the police? And I can tell you over 21 years, I've made 2 complaints. But in our sheriff, he's done a phenomenal job. And since he's been in office, he's arrested 50 police officers. So I think that when we're looking at when we're talking about law enforcement agencies across the country, we're all not grouped in the same categories. Because I tell you, I look at some agencies and I say, oh, I could never go there. So I just said that because I'm proud, and our community should be proud of what our agency is doing for our local community.
Right. I appreciate that. But you're also a voice for change and for good, right? So yes. The questions come up, and we talked about this because a couple of years ago, we did a whole thing on actually recruiting more women for police work, right? Mm-hmm. It's a predominantly male. And there's a lot of values that women bring in terms of especially de-escalation and mediation. It seems to be pretty relevant right now. And so the questions are out there, and Lisa asked this one. Are there, you know, some of the tasks that officers are asked to do that would be better handled by other departments, like public health or social workers? Because in a sense, you know, officers are asked to do social work, right? They're invited into homes where there are domestic confrontations. Is that where they're best trained? Or do you think, I mean, is there a place for including different kinds of workers within the police department so that the police can focus on policing and their community engagement can be expanded by other expertise?
Right. So a couple things. It's very, very complex. So one would have to assume that that's not being done in some form or fashion. What I can say is that we are very innovative, and we cannot do our jobs without collaborative relationships with other entities, the mental health community, the nonprofit community. So what happens, police officers are, Donna, when people call us, it is normally a 911 type call. And I don't know if a civilian that's not trained to deal with criminal or the potential for criminal behavior, or what we do, we go in and we establish what's going on. And then we have MOUs and partnerships with almost every agency in this community. And that has improved over the years as we learn more, as we are more conscious about, addressing some of the individual issues like mental health. So we know now we are getting trained. Are we the professionals in mental health? No way. But guess what? When we go, we want to make sure the scene is calm. But then we do bring in those resources every time, and we've always done that. So
here's a question that a lot of people are asking. You've heard it before. Mm-hmm. Maybe we even talked about it. I'm not sure. Mm-hmm. But we've had a lot of flashpoints before. If we look back through protesting, raising issues of social justice, there's a flashpoint, it kind of dies down. I mean, I know what we want the answer to be, but are you seeing this as a possible sea change? Is this going to not die down? Are we going to see some actual systemic changes that are going to be difference making? Because it's long overdue, right?
I can tell you the same thing that citizens are seeing and feeling is the same thing that we're seeing and feeling. There has been a paradigm shift. There's no doubt about it. I've never seen anything like this. And quite frankly, I don't even know if we've ever had riots like this. I know we had the riots with the sit-ins in the 60s, but this is a shock for all of us. This is new for all of us. So I already see significant changes already. You know, Donna, and I have a large, diverse group of friends, but, you know, people are coming out their shells. They're saying, my white friends are saying, Keisha, can you come and talk with my family so we can understand? That's never been happening. People are, and quite frankly, look at some of the protests going on. Some areas you have more Caucasians than Blacks, you know? So
how does that make you feel?
I feel good. It makes me feel good. I'm excited about it because we have haven't seen that, now, from the Black person's perspective, I feel like people are opening up their hearts and their minds to really kind of get a glimpse of what we are talking about, the life that we've been living. So I think there's a lot of positive energy. I think that the violence, the agitators, the people that are creating violence and destroying our properties and really responding in a hateful way to police, I think that they are a distraction, and I hope that they all are dealt with accordingly. And I know what people would say, well, that's just years of pain and of frustration. And my position is we don't have room for that, right? It's the distraction, they need to be dealt with. But the people who are hurting out here, utilizing their voices, change is on the rise. I know that our department, we take this seriously, and we're having those conversations, and we're reviewing our policies to see, where we can improve, but we're always doing that. Matter of fact, we have what we call a written directive monthly meeting where we are, kind of looking through our policy and procedures and updating them, and also ensuring that we are, following those procedures. So those type things is really is what really prevents a lot of some of the things that's happening in other cities from happening here.
So let me welcome everybody to Refresh. This is Refresh with some tears this morning. Very emotional, but very incredible conversation with 21-year JSO veteran. As she has said, I always write things down as you talk, Lakesha, you know that. I am blue and I'm Black and I'm proud of it. I am both. So I want to welcome, including Arnold from Brooklyn, and Taylor, our friend Taylor, our young friend Taylor has a question for you. She would love some advice. And by the way, we've heard a lot of these stories, not only locally, but nationally, on how not to feel afraid. And she's a young Black woman, a leader activist. As a matter of fact, Taylor will be on our show next week on how not to feel afraid every time I see a police officer, especially when I see them stopping Black people. I wonder if they will make it home.
Mm-hmm.
And we're hearing so much more from kids.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that, and obviously all of these questions have a multifaceted response, but I do want to say that since all of this has happened, everybody is on a high level of, awareness, sensitivity. We're scared. I see that because, I've been working with kids for 21 years, and the very kids that I've been working with, they know me personally. They've been scared. So a lot of the media and the hype and, all of that, it really contributes to that fear as well. So what I would say to her is to stop and talk with police officers. And again, check with your local department and see what programs that they offer, Donna, because like we have a civilian ride-along program where civilians can come and do a ride-along, and it's hard. If you have not walked in somebody's shoes, it's hard to, judge or understand or respect, what they do. So things like that, getting involved in the Citizens Academy so you can see behind the scenes, have a up and close personal look on the inside instead of trying to see the inside of the police department from the outside from what we see. Because every time what we see is not really what it is. So as far as, officers pulling over Black guys, and we pull over a lot of people. When I patrol and typically if you patrol in a predominantly Black community, you're gonna typically pull over Blacks, so that happens. And I'm not saying that racial profiling and unlawful stops don't happen, but I'm saying typically that's what you have. Then also, when you look at communities that have been historically, plagued with violent crime, poverty, mental health, blight, all those different social issues, there is in many of our communities, especially like locally here, on the news, you always hear Northwest Jacksonville. As soon as you hear that, because you hear it on the news so much, you automatically think so bad. But there's a criminal element out there. So the police officers that are patrolling that area, we took an oath to serve and protect. So they are out there to rid of that criminal element. So a lot of times when these kids and people live in those communities, that's what they see. But a lot of the young people, they don't know how to process, an officer, because a lot of the people that are out there that we are arresting are, their uncles, their dads, their mothers, and some of them are gang members, some of them are drug dealers, but they have these relationships with them. So I think that plays into a lot of the fear as well. So, and that's why on the flip side of that, we have community engagement, right? So you have the beat officers that's responding to calls, but then you have all these other entities in our agency that focus just on community engagement. So, and we go out in those communities as well. But I think what has happened, I know you asked me a question the other day about what I've seen. Have I seen communities change? And I have seen communities change in some of the crime-ridden areas because we are looking at underlying issues, a lot of those social issues, and it's so many of them. But one that I think is very critical is dealing with mental health illness. So think about it. You have kids that live in these high crime areas. They grow up, they witness, the norm is for them to hear gunshots, right? They witness people being robbed, stabbed, killed, and that is not normal. That is trauma. And for years and years, there was no help for them. So if there's no intervention, what they do is start to suppress that, and then they act out on it, like in school and different places, they build up this aggression. So what I've seen over the years is the programs, public, private, nonprofit, really taking a look at that. And we do that too through the Police Athletic League and some of the other programs that we have. But when you start to reach kids where they are and make sure they're healthy, they grow up into big kids, and then there are adults in that community. And I think that's how you begin to shift and change communities. So changing communities is not just the police job, right? We say that all the time. It's all of our responsibility to work together. And at the end of the day, I think that we're gonna come together more and collaborate more. But it just can't be the police officer's responsibility.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the issues behind criminal behavior, because as we look now at the history of racism, we look at the creation of how so much of racism has been systematized in, whether it's the education system, the health system, the wealth system. There's a fantastic piece I think I mentioned today on What We Owe in the New York Times about the lack of the ability to create wealth. And that doesn't mean be a millionaire. It just means to have access to financial and economic tools that will allow you to live a comfortable life. And also Dr. Wynn last week actually talked about PTSD and how racism creates PTSD, and what you just described does that. We tend to live in an echo chamber, and ideas tend to grow and they tend to amplify on each other. And there's tremendous call to defund the police, which in many people's ears sounds like more than defund, it is to take away their validation in any way, right? Defund means whatever they do is not valid. Let's take their money, spend it other places. There is some thought, though, that redistributing some of a police department's budget might make sense in helping the police department be more effective. So I don't know if you have a thought on that.
I do have a thought, and it's just my thought. And I'm just talking here locally for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. We're shorthanded. I run a zone. And when I look at the amount of crime that's happening versus, property crime, violent crime, all types of crime, and, you have a few officers, I need officers, right? So when you're talking about defund, what you're saying is you're about to get rid of some of these jobs here. Can you imagine this city without, police officers, right? So I think that, defunding and reform are two different things, right? I think that there needs to be some reform in several different areas, right? But to defund, you have to start looking at, first of all, recruiting of minorities have been tough for a long time. We have been trying to be strategic and creative in terms of how we reach Black officers, going to Black colleges, starting at the high schools, partnerships with the local colleges. They travel all over. But the problem is you start looking at how dangerous this job is. Really, it's 21 years I've been, it is dangerous. People are evil. And if you have not been face to face with evil, you have no clue, right? So when you start looking at the pay, how much agencies are paying officers to risk their lives, you know, you're responding to calls every day. You don't know who is who, and you're pulling over people and you're interacting with thousands of people. So, you know, and then benefits, pensions. So it's a lot of things to consider, but I can tell you this right now, with the state of how things are, and people are seeing a lot of, you know, demonizing of police officers. I mean, I was down at that protest, and when it got crazy, Donna, and I saw with my own eyes, people jumping on the police cars, you know, breaking the windows, trying to physically attack us. Somebody hit me with a big brick, right, in my arm. So.
And what did that feel like? At that moment, what was your thoughts?
Well, I sent Sherry a picture. I wanted to pull it up because I want to tell you how that I took a picture of how I was feeling. I wanted to make sure I remember how I was looking and feeling that night.
Sherry, when you get it, just pull it up, okay?
Yes. So I'm telling you, I told my husband he called me on the phone. He's like, "You all right?" I said, "I don't know." I almost had, you know, tunnel vision out there, because understand that the beginning of the day, it was a peaceful protest. It was a peaceful walk and everything, but then things got very violent. But we saw the agitators trying to change the climate out there. They tried to, you know, get people angry, and they wanted this to happen. So I watched it, you know, escalate. So when it came to bricks being thrown and people trying to really attack the police, you know, at that point, anytime the first rock is thrown, a fire started, the peaceful protest is over. So it behooves those who are out there peacefully protesting to leave, because our job is to protect them, but our job is to address criminal element. And I was out there. I took a picture because I thought to myself, I could never go fight in Iraq and in these countries, because it felt like a war zone out there. And I was hurt because I heard, you know, a lot of the Blacks were focusing their attention on me, saying that I'm an Uncle Tom, I'm with them, and, you know, using profanity, and which all that was fine, because being a police officer, you have tough skin, and, you know, you are called some of everything if you've been on a police officer for any amount of time. But when it became violent, you know, I was just really hurt. I was hurt because, you know, we all can agree that we have that percentage of officers that are bad across this country, but that other large percent that are good, that are intentional about making impact, building the bridge, bridging that gap. And I internalized that because I was being attacked physically. I'm telling you, I was hurt. I was angry, I was confused, and I went home. I couldn't wait to get home. I just sat in the shower about 1:30 in the morning. I just cried, because I felt like, you know, I've given 21 years. I was that good cop, you know. I was the one that told on the person that wasn't doing right. I stopped people. I was the one that jumping in, de-escalating situations. So, you know, it was just heartbreaking, though.
And it is heartbreaking, but we all have to understand that the entire nation, the entire world watched a police officer, after hearing story after story, saw it in live, right? Live TV, in a sense, a man die, a man be murdered, a Black man be murdered. And you know what? Everybody is angry. They're hurt.
Right.
No one even knows what to do with all of that, which is why we're seeing this. And then we hear stories like somebody just wrote this in. What is your practical advice when multiple officers pull you over? It happened to me. 6 police cars detained for almost an hour. They said because I had loud music on.
Well, I'm very careful to.
Is that David? Is David there? Is that
no,
David?
that's Boris.
Oh, thank you, Boris.
So what I would say is, I try not to speak on individual incidents because I don't know the totality of everything. But what I can say, it's important for people to know their rights. It's important for people to ask those questions, the why, and also to request supervisors. And also, if you feel like there has been an injustice and things aren't right, if you get a ticket, you can fight it with the judge. And if you are dissatisfied with the service, file a complaint with the internal affairs. Now, this is what I've had a lot of the years that I patrol predominantly on the Black community. People would say they would have all these complaints and they all sound legitimate, Donna. But when I ask, what was the officer's name? What's his ID number? And because those are things in our policy that we have to offer to citizens. And when they say, I don't know, I said, did you follow through? Did you? Well, no, they're not going to do anything. Well, it's just frustrating. So how can we identify those bad officers, right? Who are not, upholding the law or upholding our standards if the people don't complain, right? If there's not a track record of those complaints.
No, and that's fair. But I would say this, and I bet you'd recognize this too. I'm sure there are a lot of people wwho have complained and maybe not in the right way, but don't feel heard. And I think that's what we're experiencing now is people want to be heard. And we can now put it out there and say, okay, we need some response. It's like when Tom said earlier, he sent a question and is like, how do we foster more productive police and race relations? We don't want to be in a culture, right? We understand the police have a job to do.
Right.
So when they stop us, if we did something wrong, I guess they're not going to be our best friend at that moment, right? But you want somebody who you feel connecting. Now, you also said something that was really startling, and I've heard you say this before, is that if you have not been face to face with evil, you have no clue. So when you've been trained to be ready for evil 24/7 as the ultimate in your job, sometimes maybe it's just a little harder to de-escalate, to deal with the public as well, because you're always braced for what can be the worst. And the worst that can happen to you is pretty bad.
Right. And I agree with that. So, you spend a whole 20 years, a lifetime being prepared to survive in a gun battle, in a fight. So you have these red flags they quickly come in our head. So we're quickly on, guard and defense. So sometimes that is, I guess it becomes like some officers' nature possibly, and they don't know how to revert back to not being on high alert. So that comes with training, that comes with supervision. So I certainly agree with that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you mentioned, and Arnold asked this question, would it be beneficial to redistribute than defund, which is kind of what we said, use money for police mental health treatment. When Dr. Wynn last week took us through what PTSD actually is, you realize that as many of the Black population he was talking about at the time that experienced racism, you realize that police officers, right, with increasingly, incredible amounts of exposure to violence, also have PTSD. So you have these populations that are coming in contact with each other that both have real mental needs, I would say emotional needs, that could be addressed, that perhaps can be one of the ways these two communities can better connect.
Right. And I can tell you, we have things in place to do that. And maybe we can do that better. We are trained. We have continuous training on, how to deal with the mental health community. We have all of our officers are CIT trained in critical incidents, dealing with mental health. And also, even at the jail, we have nurses and we have people that are mental health counselors at the jail. But again, we have great partnerships with those entities that are there. So, and maybe down the line, right now, we're doing a pilot program right now to where we have a mental health counselor, riding with a police officer. So, matter of fact, I'm part of the grant that we received where it's given us the ability to look at all of how we handle and address persons with mental health issues. So what we did was we brought all the stakeholders together within the agency to kind of see, how often are we being trained, really? And we spoke with the beat officers to get their buy-in to see where are the gaps, what can we do better, what are your needs? And then we sit around the table with all the different stakeholders from the mental health community. So a lot of work is being done. It has been done. I think for me, I think that as an agency, we probably can do better with communicating that. A lot of stuff is on our website, but a lot of people don't go to the website.
That's exactly right. And I do think we've talked about this too, is that there's not one national police agency, right? Every police agency exists in a city or a location, and they could probably be better in overall messaging and communication. But one of the other things you just said I wanted to go back to was you spoke about how difficult it is to recruit young Black police officers, which speaks to the overall diversity of police forces, right? Where are the women? Where are the people of color, right? How much does a police department reflect the community in which they serve, and how much does that serve as a barrier as opposed to an opportunity to connect more deeply?
Yeah, well,
if I look at, we did research 6 years ago. We looked at the JSO. I mean, there's really no maybe one senior woman in the leadership. How can that be, right? How many people of color are there? We need to do better there, don't we?
Right. And I think that every sheriff has looked at that and have been putting strategies in place to recruit and hire. I think that just over the years, I think policing has gotten so dangerous. Donna, we have officers killed every day in the line of duty in this country. A lot of them just for hateful reasons, officers being ambushed, So I think that the culture of this job is you have to really have a passion for this, and it's not all about the money, but people need to be able to, take care of their families. And quite frankly, a lot of the salaries are not good. I used to work in recruiting as well. So, the standards, you have to be able to reach a certain standard as well. I know, I think under Rutherford or Mike Williams, he lowered the standard for, for instance, college degree. For years, you had to have a 4-year degree. So we realized, maybe we need to look at that. So now it's a 2-year degree. So we can get more people in. So I think that when you look at recruiting, it's so many different factors to consider. I just don't know if I was going to start over today that I would want to do that in light of everything, and the community don't know half of the things that goes on in the life of a police officer. Donna, we are responding to people, they're at their worst. People are not calling us to say, come in and have dinner. People are having, they're having marital problems. You name it. And now we become counselors. We become everything to that person at that moment. And then we leave from this job to go home to our own problems and issues. And I think for a long time, people don't really see us as human. And that's why I've been really intentional over the years with people really seeing who I am. We cry, we're depressed. We have a high number of suicides amongst officers. You know why? Because all these critical incidents that you see over a long time span. I remember early on in my career, because I would see how officers were becoming desensitized. And I remember praying about it. And I said, because I responded to a call where I saw two young Black men with their brains blown out. And I was hurt. But I prayed, I asked God, I said, help me not to become desensitized, but help me to deal with this, right? Because I know what it looks like to be desensitized, and I didn't want to be like that, and it happens sometimes. And let me say this, I think that for a long time, law enforcement has been so male dominant, right? So sometimes men don't know how to say, I need help, because they're taught to be men at an early age. You're a man, but really they were a boy. So they have a harder time with asking for help, So,
right, which is why we need more women. We really do. Let me ask you, Siobhan, this is an interesting question from Siobhan. She says, what are your thoughts on pulling officers out of schools? Because there are some studies that show officers' school presence leads to a school to prison pipeline for young people.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So I used to work in the schools as a school resource officer. I was a sergeant in the schools. I think that me personally, when JSO was in the schools, I loved it. My officers loved it. So you have to think about it. Those jobs are it's not somebody that you assign there. Those are people that say, hey, they sign up. I want to be a school resource officer, because they have a passion for you. They have that unique connection. So 9 times out of 10 here in Jacksonville, the officers in the schools were there because they wanted to. And most of them have really good relationships. So it just depends on, I can tell you over the years, the violence in the school place, I wouldn't be a teacher. I'm going to be serious. I just couldn't be a teacher. I'd just be too scared and worried, So I know there's debate and there's studies.
You're a police officer. Why wouldn't you be?
No, I'm saying if I were a teacher.
Yes.
If I were a teacher, so I've seen.
I think what Siobhan's talking about, though, is when you have a police officer on site, that it seems to be an easier path in terms of discipline from taking a kid into the criminal system versus if there were no police officers there. I'm just kind of guessing here. I'm not, you know what I mean, in terms of this school to prison pipeline.
Well, the officers are typically at the school for security, but also they're there to, forge positive relationships with the kids. So we go back to saying, what can we do to foster positive relationships? Well, actually, that is one of the programs that was really good in Jacksonville that was implemented for that purpose. So kids can have that day-to-day interaction with police officers.
So this will be our last question. I think, let's see. But Rachel asked, and I think it's a beautiful question. She sends love and understanding because she is that person. And you do sit on the JPEF board, right? We sit on the JPEF board together.
My eyes are open.
Right? Yeah. So it's beautiful work on behalf of our students. But she says, what can we do, police and community, to change the perception of Black people as most likely to be criminals, particularly Black males? Now, you and I have had such long conversations about this. This is a really important question.
Yeah, I agree. I first think that right now, parents, caregivers need to be having real conversations with children, educating them on the history and also educating them on their rights, and I think that we need to have more interaction, but it can't just be waiting on the police, right? Again, we offer so many different opportunities. And me personally, I would like to see people really starting to get engaged, because we need more community members to be our voices. So for instance, when you come and do a ride along, Donna, now you're able to talk to your influence of friends and say, hey, I saw a different perspective. That was this, it was this and that. So I think we need more of that. And it's just going to take time. It's going to take time. And patience, I tell people all the time, when you look at the history of, policing, and now we have this paradigm shift, things are not going to change overnight. It's just not going to happen. I want to lose weight. I went to work out yesterday for the first time. You think I'm down on my goal weight? No, it's going to take some time. It's going to take work. It's going to take consistency and for me to be disciplined. But it also is going to take me to work with the young lady that I've hired to work with me. And I think that JPEF is in a unique position to bridge that gap. You do it too. We all do it. We all do our part. And I think that we all need to, and really from all of this, Donna, we all need to take a look at ourselves. First of all, the COVID-19 got us prepared and got us in this mode to where we all got in our little spaces, right? Where we were alone. And if we didn't learn something from COVID-19, that pandemic, we won't learn nothing from this. But I think that the first thing we have to do is take a look on the inside, because none of us are perfect, right? And then we need to give people grace. We need to be willing to listen to people, whether we agree with them or not. I'm telling you, every time I talk to people, they think that their opinion is the Bible. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to stop doing that and really start having these authentic conversations like you do so well.
Well, with friends with you. I should share with everybody, we're going to have to go, and this has been amazing. Maybe we'll have to do part 2 in a couple of weeks as we learn more together, Lakesha. I think everybody would really appreciate continuing to learn from you. Not only that, but feel your authenticity, and you're just remarkable. But 2 of the greatest days I've had in Jacksonville have been riding, and it wasn't in your police car, although I would love to do that. It was in my car.
Yes.
It was for Generation Works. And so we were visiting 18 nonprofit sites around the city of Jacksonville early Saturday morning. And everywhere we went, Lakesha said, well, I was a beat cop there. And let me tell you what I learned there and the people that I met. And you knew every single community and you brought it alive with stories. I would never be in many of those communities. I would never see that. And so you made my hometown richer for me. And that's why I always get that day on your calendar every year, because it's such a gift, truly a gift. Actually, Arnold from Brooklyn says, Lakesha, great to hear a female police officer speak on these issues. I live in a large city and so correct, male dominated. My family lives here in Jacksonville. Rachel says, honest and true. Thank you. I say honest and true. Thank you, of course. So without, tell her Gary Williams is here watching.
Hey, Gary. Hey.
That's really nice. Gary? And Coretta Hill says, I would recommend the documentary 13th to understand absolutely where the criminalization comes from. Actually, excellent. We have all watched it. It is amazing. And it really does highlight where the criminalization of Black men stem from. And once you do understand that more, then actually you could begin to look at the world differently. I want to say thank you to all of you for joining us today. This was an important refresh. Everyone is. And sometimes people say, well, how can you be refreshed when you speak about such difficult, uncomfortable topics? Well, you heard Lakesha say, it's good to be uncomfortable. We have to get comfortable with that if we're going to grow. And honestly, that is refreshing. I love to thank our team at Generation W always. Next week I am like tongue-tied. We will have members of our younger generation. Taylor, we'll see you then. Young leaders and activists, truly the catalysts of change. They'll join us for a conversation on what they're seeing, what they're learning, and you know what they want all of us to see and learn. I know it's a time we're really worried about our kids, about isolation and stress and anxiety and the fact that, they don't have freedom of movement. They're learning differently, but it would be great to hear from them. So I'm sure you'll be with us for that. Thanks to everyone, of course, Sherry, our producer, Stacy, Jamie, Kasha, Christina, Tara, Elizabeth, Ruth, and our newest member. We all are welcoming Mariah Denson to our Gen Wow team. To all of you who are joining us, please keep spreading the word that there is a place to refresh in this world. And by all means, stay in touch. Please, if you don't already, subscribe to our newsletter, genwnow.com, and follow our social. And remember, together we are powerful. Together, we are not alone. And as Lakesha Burton, she said, we all said today so eloquently, we all need to do our part. We need to take a look at ourselves. And we salute you, Lakesha, for so proudly saying that your profession is a calling. And we know how you've treated all of us, that it is a godly calling in all of your beauty and spirit. And that you are Black and you are blue and you are proud of it. And you know what? We are proud of you too. So thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.